Hello everybody, you have tuned in to Eric Jose on Making a Murderer on YouTube. I cover virtually any aspect of making a murderer. I go over the evidence, the documents, the photos. So if you like, stay tuned, and in the future I'll have many more videos besides the one you're about to see. Alright, hello everybody. We're here today to have a little call with Mr. Capaldi and Mr. Hodnott. All three of us in a call again. One call, three continents. Anyway, so we're going to talk a little bit about, obviously, the control question. You see I'm wearing the shirt here. But more importantly, folks, I wanted to talk to you about the fact that I talked to the t-shirt makers today. I'm going to be getting the control question t-shirts made up, the ones that are going to say hashtag Brendan Dassey at the top. That way it kind of puts into perspective what the control question's in reference to. Also allows you to represent for Brendan Dassey when you wear it. And help make more people aware, and have them ask questions about Brendan Dassey, and that's what we're hoping to achieve with these shirts. Is that while wearing them, people will walk up to us and ask us, hey, what do you mean, just out of curiosity, maybe some people will, who knows? You're waiting at a bus station somewhere where people are bored anyway, and somebody sees your shirt and walks up and asks you about it. I don't know. Anyways, DMV, wherever, but it's just something I feel that can help to create even a little bit more awareness, not only just for Brendan, but for juveniles in the justice system in his position, currently and to come in the future. Because unless the Supreme Court steps in, the state courts are going to keep running business as usual here. And they're going to continue to just kind of casually give this so-called special care that they're giving. So we hope that the Supreme Court's going to step in, but getting the batch of shirts made up. So I just wanted everybody to know that we're going to, whatever the profit is from it, all the money that profits from it, I'm going to try to get these shirts out as cheap as possible. I'm basically gonna, as best as I can, I'm gonna try to make them as cheap as possible so that everybody out there feels like they can afford one. Hopefully, this is what I hope. I'm gonna find out what the prices are tomorrow, and we'll see how we can do that. But all the profits that do come from these shirts are going to Brendan. They're gonna go. All the profits from the shirts I'm having made are gonna go to Brendan. So just so everybody knows, hopefully we'll get some people to buy these, and like I said, create a little bit of awareness for Brendan, put a little bit of money on his books. Just so that's the hope, that's the goal. We talk a little bit about that. We also talk about, obviously, Brendan's case, many aspects of it, a little bit about Stephen, because it comes into effect when the fact that you have no evidence of this crime happening, and it matters because Brendan, there's no evidence that Brendan was involved in this in any way. There's not as like I said, as one of the bank judges said, not even like a scintilla of any evidence that Brendan was part of this or involved in this, in any of the places where this supposedly happened. So anyways, we talk about a lot of that, and we also have a little bit of fun talking about rugby and stuff at the end. So anyways, we'll go ahead and get right to it, and we'll see you at the end. Okay.
Hey, Richard,
now we're recording proper.
Oh, okay. Keep it, and yes.
So, anyways, to start out, I guess we'll talk about the shirts, right? The
Yes.
The control question t-shirts. I actually spoke to the t-shirt makers today.
Rip Van Winkle.
They're gonna, Yeah. Well,
Rip Van Winkle.
Rip Van Winkle's wife, apparently.
Mrs. Winkle.
Rip Van Winkle's wife, I guess, is now. I don't know where this term. I hope Winkle. This is a term of affection that this guy is known by, or something. But anyway, his wife is going to pass the information to him. He's going to get to me tomorrow what the price is and the minimum order is on each shirt, and what the price is on each shirt and what the minimum order is. And then what's going to happen is whatever the price is, whatever profit comes from these T-shirts, they're going to say hashtag Brendan Dassey on them, so that when you wear it out, you can be really creating awareness and representing for Brendan, but also getting people to ask you about some of the things about the case that really stink, like, for instance, the control question, which is why this T-shirt got made. My two buddies here, who were big fans of my channel, got together and made it because they saw how much of a burning issue it was for me, and I got to say I love them for it. When I saw this shirt, I was over the moon. I was over the moon. I will say. So,
I like it. I like the T-shirt for a whole host of reasons. One, that the issue is really relevant and important, but it provokes conversation, and
right.
That's what you want. You want people to have a conversation about it. And I was last evening at a function where I was wearing the Avery Salvage Yard hoodie, zipper thing hoodie, and people were asking me about what's that all about? Or
right.
kind of thinking, where did you get that?
Where'd you get that? Right.
And, yeah. Well, there's a story. And
there hangs a tale.
Because you can't, for those who know nothing about the making a murderer issues, you can't tell it in 2 minutes, can you? I mean, there's so many tentacles to it. It's a long discussion. But even those who know something about it, it's still a long discussion. So I've never had a discussion with anyone about the whole thing that haven't sort of, got wandered off and said, oh, well, next, who else is to talk to? You've got their attention captured for quite a long period of time.
Right.
And that's the benefit of the shirt thing, like you have there, and other ones. So,
hey, I mean, you're right. Remember when we were in Manitowoc, and we were wearing our shirts and we were down there having breakfast at the motel there, and then we had that young couple walk right up to us and started asking us about the case and talking to us and everything, and I thought that was awesome. I mean, that was really cool.
Yeah, exactly. And there's a lot, I think, with young people especially, because they're not, because they're young and they're not sort of polluted with past issues. And I think the young people these days are more interested in social justice issues than certainly we were even aware of when we were that age. So
certainly,
yeah. They're the people you want to influence for change, that's for sure.
Right,
so,
absolutely. They are the future.
Exactly.
Well, I would just like to point out that, as Mark was saying, how cool is it to be able to say that, or where did you get that T-shirt? Oh, I went to Manitowoc in Wisconsin to buy this T-shirt. That's brilliant, isn't it? To actually have had a shirt from where this all started. It's funny because last night, Eunice says to me, Paul, where did you get that Australia shirt from? Because she knows how much, when it comes to sport, the rivalry between England and Australia is absolutely massive. And Mark would be, in agreement with that, yeah? So she says
Absolutely.
to me, where did that shirt come from? I said, well, my pal Mark Hodden sent it to me. I said, because I sent him a T-shirt. What do you mean you sent him a T-shirt? I said, I sent one to Richard and one to Mark, So then I had to explain the whole control question thing to her. Hence the reason why I had to say, well, if Brendan had originally said to Mark, to Tom Fassbender's first question, oh yes, there was a tattoo. Oh yes, that would have been his control question, completely debunked. But that's exactly what happened. That is exactly what did happen.
It was what eventually happened.
Yeah.
Tom Fassbender, in my mind, Tom Fassbender pressed his luck. He basically asserts that this tattoo existed to Brendan and asks him if he remembers it. And Brendan says, which is kind of the answer they wanted. It was going in the direction they wanted, but I feel like Tom Fassbender probably didn't like how wishy-washy is as a negative response, and that prodded him to say further, do you disagree with me when I say that? And once he did that, he immediately put Brendan on the defensive, had Brendan thinking about how the whole entire interview had been going all morning, and so he immediately acquiesced to, no, I don't disagree with you. Basically, I do agree with you about a false thing that never happened. Now, Brendan didn't know it was a control question. He thought it was like every other question that they had been asking him. So he had for him, this question was no different than any other question that he was getting asked that day. And to me, it's really, really just showcases exactly how malleable he was in the hands of Tom Fassbender and Mark Wiegert.
It also shows to me there's an undercurrent theme there too of Brendan's fundamental honesty in how he answers things. As soon as he felt, when Tom Fassbender said, do you disagree with me? Brendan's natural instinct to be honest comes in, and he says, I just didn't think of it, right? He didn't want a straight out lie, right?
Right.
And you can see that in the way he answers stuff. There's that degree of, I don't know, just thinking, the only thing I know is to be truthful, and that's the only way he knows to speak. And that's how Brendan's always spoken.
He's not a dishonest person, right?
It's almost like an honest naivety, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yes, and he doesn't know how to lie like they think he can, right?
Right.
And
exactly.
And you can see that in that style of answering, and that goes to his credit as a young man. So, yeah.
He certainly is reacting. The other thing is that some of you out there who are watching this, you may have seen my videos regarding the fact that Teresa had a piercing. She had a belly button piercing. We know this because when her mother calls in to report her missing, she says that Teresa had a belly button piercing. She says it before, saying that she had ear piercings. So this to me tells me that Teresa probably, most likely, I'm pretty much dead sure Teresa had a belly button piercing. So that makes it all the more odd when Tom Fassbender asks Brendan, did she have any piercings, tattoos, piercing, scars, or tattoos? And tattoo was just happened to be the third thing he said. And that's what Brendan sort of keyed in on. But the suggestion of a piercing was made, and if Brendan had actually seen Teresa, her bare stomach, then that would have immediately tipped him off to say, yes, I saw a piercing. But he didn't. Yeah. He ended up defaulting to the very last thing in Fassbender's list, which was a tattoo. And he focused in on whether or not she had a tattoo. I mean, that looks obvious to me as well. So the fact that Brendan doesn't mention this piercing that seems pretty evident was there is also just another thing that kind of blows the control question out of the water.
Yes. I mean, if you start the position, if you analyse this whole topic on the basis that Brendan, as we all agree, had absolutely nothing to do with any of this,
right?
It just makes all those questions so bloody ridiculous, right? He hasn't got a clue what happened to Teresa, not a clue.
Yeah.
So, anyway, but you're right about the control question. I mean, it's, Tom Fassbender's control question got blown out of the water. But how the majority on-bank opinion read it otherwise, it's just, oh my God.
That's the part for me that I just have to sit here and go, okay, wait. I mean, look, is it just me? Because I grew up in a house where I'm not saying I got abused, guys, but I grew up in a house. My dad, if he hadn't gone to Vietnam, would have been an English professor. Okay? He would have been an English professor. Okay. just to put it that plainly, if we used improper grammar and we didn't say things the right way in our house, he would come out of his easy chair and come across the room and smack some sense into us until we started talking properly, the way that he thought was proper. So that's why I know, and when I read that, I immediately went, nope, that doesn't work. No, wait, I wanted to fly across the room like my dad used to on these guys. So anyway.
Yeah.
But these on-bank judges are learned people. They've gone through all kinds of school. I'm sure they had to take at least a half a dozen, advanced, modern English classes and things like that. And they've had to study. They understand the English language, and they understand that the same way I do. Why did they represent it like that, in their opinion? I hope it was an honest mistake. That's all I can say. I hope it was just careless.
I have a problem with this, and that is something that we alluded to before. These judges are voted in, aren't they?
They're nominated by the president.
But to become a judge, to start off at the bottom of the ladder, you get voted in, and then you go up the ladder.
Right,
is that right?
But the only way to become a federal circuit court judge is the president nominates you.
I mean, I'll put it this way:
then you have to get approved through Congress, but
how come, like, there are 3 judges on the on-bank panel that completely get it, and there were 4 numpties that voted against Brendan?
Oh, but there would have been 4. They got rid of Posner somehow. I'm convinced. Somehow they scared off Posner. Posner would have went in the favor of Brendan Dassey. That would have created a tie, and Brendan would have won by default.
And
that's
then
how
when
close Brendan was to not having to appeal the Supreme Court.
But
I would personally like to know what's behind the story of Posner leaving, really. The real reason.
But then when it comes to the Supreme Court, the 6 amicus briefs might not have been quite so, there might not have been this sort of strength behind Brendan had he won that en banc review. Because he lost it, they're now fighting from sort of a situation of having to attack rather than defend.
Right. Yeah, I see what you mean.
I think that's true.
I tend to think that a lot of this support would have came out anyway. Maybe it would have only been 3 or 4 briefs at the cert stage if Brendan had prevailed and it was the state that was petitioning the Supreme Court instead of him. Right? Because that's how it would have went. If Brendan would have won the en banc review, the state would be petitioning the Supreme Court. So I tend to think that if it was the state petitioning the Supreme Court, maybe we might have seen a couple less A briefs. But I think many of these entities would have still wanted to make clear how important many people that matter in this field feel about it. So I think that's important.
Interestingly, I think if it had gone that way and the state was petitioning the Supreme Court, that the argument that was put forward now, that is a lack of a application of special care, wouldn't have been an argument in a sense, because by virtue of it being accepted at the federal level, the argument would have been that they hadn't exercised special care.
Right.
In other words, Brendan, and therefore you think at the Supreme Court level they would go, well, what is it about our law that didn't happen here, right? So I wonder whether the whole argument would have been different had it come from the state to the Supreme Court as opposed from Brendan. And in many ways, in my little philosophical way, I think the country's going to be better off that it's come the way it has come. Because it's really put the focus on special care. Right?
Yeah, I think there's a chance for that. And you may have heard me talking about that recently, because I think this is like a huge, huge opportunity for the Supreme Court to really thump the lower courts. I mean, it's a perfect opportunity for them to do so, because everybody's saying, oh, but it's habeas. It's habeas. It doesn't affect enough law. It's not really that important, so it doesn't affect enough. BS. Okay, if the state courts suddenly know that juveniles of limited mental capacity can now see a route through AEDPA and getting habeas relief, they're going to suddenly be actually given that special care. They're going to suddenly be making darn sure that they're giving that special care, because they want to be able to argue that on appeal, because Brendan Dassey opened up the doorway. And that's what I mean, that to me is huge, because if we can keep these state courts honest, because now all these kids who are being victimized, these juveniles of somewhat limited mental abilities, will now have a way through AEDPA. It's going to make these courts pay attention and be honest and figure out and really do the special circumstances. So it's huge, and I don't know how anybody could minimize it.
Yep.
Exactly. I mean, and by applying special care, it doesn't take away the facts of the matter. It's just the way you deal with the person.
Right.
If a person of limited ability or a juvenile is guilty of a particular offence, the facts will speak to that.
Right.
This is about making sure the facts are the real facts, not the created ones. And
exactly.
So no one should be in fear that, guilty people will go free, in a sense, because the facts should be the evidence that convicts someone, not the human coercion or the human intervention.
Right.
Especially when the people are vulnerable. So.
Yeah, and that's the thing in this case, I mean, none of the facts came from Brendan. It's like I say, when the state argues this stuff, they don't argue anything. You know what I mean? They don't really argue. I'm sorry.
I mean, ask yourself this basic question. How does the state accept that it's okay to convict Brendan
Right.
when there is absolutely no evidence
Right.
beyond his confession that is questionable and also recanted by him in court under
Right.
prosecution, under oath. How does the state think they have got the right person, or that Brendan is any way involved in this? No evidence at all.
Right. Correct.
It's just like it.
Yeah, there's not a scintilla. As
It's
one of the
unbelievable.
judges in the en-banc review, I believe, the dissenting judges said something to the effect that there's not even a scintilla of evidence, not even the slightest hint of any evidence that Brendan Dassey was involved in any of this. I mean, yeah, absolutely. That's one of the hugest points. The fact that there's no evidence to back it up. And that was part of what I was saying about the state's argument all throughout Brendan Dassey's habeas appeals here. They don't really argue anything. When they argue, they say, oh yeah, well, his confession is real because he said they stabbed her and that they shot her and that, or actually no, Wiegert said they shot her. So they stabbed her, they raped her, they cut her hair and all that stuff. And that makes that means that his confession is real because he offered those things. Yes. But the problem with those things is that you cannot corroborate a single one of them. You can't prove that any one of them actually happened. So that speaks to the weakness of the state's argument. And then you think about what else did they do besides that weak argument? Oh yeah, AEDPA, mic drop. That's it. They just go, hey, it's AEDPA, it's AEDPA, it's AEDPA, and we don't even have to argue because it's AEDPA. And it's like that's to me how simplified it is really for them. Go ahead, Paul.
Yeah.
Sorry. Yeah. Well, you got to remember, we're dealing with Wisconsin, right?
Right.
Now, two things. Do you think, surely, for them, it's a case of the end justifies the means? The confession by Brendan got them exactly what they wanted, a confession that they could use against Stephen Avery. And I mean, we're talking about Tom Fassbender. Yeah, is that the same Tom Fassbender that keeps CDs for 12 years?
Yeah. Tell him I want my old Wu-Tang CD back.
He's a music buff, Paul.
Yes. I mean, he's been on television, and it tries to come across as credible. I mean, I can imagine if he ever ends up in court opposite Zellner, he's going to get some grilling. He's
going to suddenly have a stutter. I guarantee it.
Yeah.
But is it going to be?
The sad part about all of this, as we all know only too well, is that they just use Brendan as a piece of expendable bait.
Right.
And they were okay with that. So irrespective of anything to do with the law, etc., the morality of what they did is just inexcusable. And they didn't care about Brendan, not one bit. Nope. They didn't care about him. The very fact they allowed him they should have stopped him being interviewed without a lawyer present or without a responsible person present. Yeah. In fact, they knew they shouldn't be doing that.
Yeah.
How on earth the courts allowed that to be evidence on that basis beyond me.
Yeah, look at what the law professor's A-brief has told us. The Supreme Court has said many times, if you proceed to use the full read technique against a juvenile, you're rolling the dice on the reliability of the confession that you're going to get. You're basically you're not going to really be able to put much stock in it because too many juveniles that even innocent ones under the full read technique will confess to a crime they didn't even commit. It's been proven, and the Supreme Court has said it in past decisions. It's not like some BS thing that's being made up. These law professors know their stuff. So the fact that that's being ignored, and it's come from the Supreme Court already, and it's being ignored, that's further reason why they need to thump the lower courts in the way that I'm suggesting. And
if Brendan had any competent advocate or lawyer with him in any of those interviews, that advocate or lawyer would have said, "Brendan, you do not answer any questions." That's what he would have said, or her, if it was a she. And then in that case, there's no confession, and Brendan's at home and with his family. He's not in prison.
Right.
The mere lack of representation in any of those interviews, and this goes to the heart of special care, both in terms of his right to representation, and to presume that he understood his Miranda rights and he waived them is just pathetic.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
This goes to the morality of their behaviour, irrespective of what they were trying to do to convict someone.
Yep.
Their morality fell over big time. They should have said, "Hey, this boy needs someone with him. And we're going to get someone with him who's competent." But they weren't interested in him. That all presupposes they care about him as an individual, to protect and to serve. Where were they protecting and serving Brendan Dassey?
Right.
When Mark Wiegert gets up in the stand and says, "Well, our primary job is to protect, and safety and blah, blah." Where was the safety and protection for Brendan Dassey in any of this? Not
none.
An iota of evidence of that in any way.
Nope. That's it. I mean, they clearly feed him everything. They clearly lead him down a path. It's always been the thing that everybody notices about it. I wonder at some of the people that don't see it. Some of the people that actually think he's guilty. It just boggles my mind. But clearly, he did not offer anything corroborated by actual evidence. Nothing that he offered was corroborated, and only things that could be corroborated by actual evidence were the things that were offered by Fassbender and Wiegert. When you have, when it's all colored within the lines in such a way, it's obvious. Yeah, that was pretty much set up to be a setup against Brendan. It was feed him the facts and let him regurgitate them back at some point, hopefully. And that's how sad it is. But none of that stuff came from Brendan, and anything that didn't come from investigators and that came out of Brendan's mouth most likely came from the media, which was talking about the place where he lived and the people who lived there constantly, because Stephen Avery was in the news constantly, because this was a case that the state of Wisconsin spent the most money that they ever spent prosecuting a case. So this thing was getting all kinds of attention because of all the money that was being spent on it and everything else. So, yeah, he had an awareness of everything that was going on in the media and what he heard there too. So to suggest that, like I said, it proves that he didn't know anything, because he didn't talk about the piercing, even though piercing was suggested by Tom Fassbender when he was asking the control question. He misses that opportunity, and like I said, he ends up acquiescing to a false fact. So these things, like I said in one of my videos, that's like textbook for the Brendan interrogation. They ask him a question, he answers it. They don't like his answer really, so they ask a different way, maybe with a different tone or with a different demeanor or whatever, and he spits out a different answer. That's pretty much like the textbook for the way that Brendan's confession went, pretty much the whole time.
Yeah.
It's real easy to see. So, I hope more people start to make squawk about it as we do. And there's a lot of people out there squawking about it already, by the way. Don't want to suggest that there aren't, but we could always use more.
Yeah. Just a quick question to do with special care. Mark Wiegert, taps him on the knee. That's special care, isn't it? Fassbender says, I'm an officer now, but at the moment I'm like a father to you, right. And I'd like to come and. That's special care, is it not?
That's abuse.
Yeah, that's. Basically, it kind of creeps me out when I see Mark Wiegert touching Brendan. Actually, it really creeps me out, and especially when I see him sitting next to Brendan, like with his arm around the back of Brendan and stuff. Just creeps me out, dude. I'm just like, dude, just get back in your chair.
But, all of that would have been not an issue if Brendan had proper counsel present for him. None of that would have been an issue, because they would not have allowed any of that to happen. And Judge Fox's willingness to accept Brendan's confession when he knows of all of that is just reprehensible, as far as I'm concerned. I want to have faith in the judges, but his willingness to allow that confession to come in on the basis that there were no legal representation, and even in evidence, he in the end gave Kaczynski the flick but still let a lot of the fruits of all that continue on. I mean, where's his head? Where is Judge Fox's head in all of this?
Not only that,
it's
but
just unbelievable.
Not only that with Len Kaczynski, but even before Len Kaczynski, right? He had that lawyer that was related to the Hallbox.
Yep.
And I can't remember exactly what it is right now, but there was something he did right before he walked off into the sunset that screwed Brendan too. I can't remember what it was. There was something that he
I think
didn't
he
file
gave
or
up
failed
on.
to...
It was some pre-submission thing. He didn't take the option to do something.
Right.
I forget
can't remember
what it was.
I'll find out, everybody, what it was exactly. But there was something that lawyer who was related to the Hallbox did right before he walked off that kind of put the stab to Brendan a little bit. So I gotta find out, and I'll let you know as soon as I figure it out. Probably by
was his name something like Engelstein or something like that?
I don't remember what that lawyer's name was.
It was something Stein at the end, wasn't it?
I think the issue was that he failed. He didn't take up the option to have a pre-committal hearing or conference that he was entitled to have. Mm-hmm. That he just let Brendan be, remanded without a hearing. So, wow. I mean, without a sort of a hearing of some preliminary evidence to see whether that was warranted. Oh, okay. He just basically it had the effect of making sure that they had him in custody. That was the effect of it.
Right.
And so that's what he didn't do. So it was an action of omission, I would suggest, knowingly. So.
Ah, okay.
So.
But can I just ask a quick question to do with the Judge Fox in this case? Who is he employed by? Is he self-employed or does he work for somebody?
Maybe he works for the state.
He works for the state. He works for the district court. Therefore the state. He gets a paycheck from the state.
Yeah. Yeah.
Just saying.
Well, the states pay their courts. It's a government agency, so they got to get paid by somebody. But
I find it remarkable. I mean, it may be true of courts generally. I just find it remarkable. There seems to be no quality control that goes over the behaviour of judges and the judicial system. Irrespective of the merits of the case, just put those aside for a moment. Everyone should be subject to review when you're in that position. Mm-hmm. I mean, if you sat down and did a review of Judge Fox's and actual Judge Willis's, behaviour in their cases, mm-hmm. would you give them a tick? What would you give them out of 10?
Right.
At best, I'd there's some procedural things they undertake. I'd best give them about a 5.
Yeah.
I want to give them a 10. I really want to, but they don't deserve it.
Yeah.
But then within MTSO, when they have their annual reviews, it's other members of the department that do the reviews and tell anybody who wants to hear how wonderful all the officers are.
Right.
It would only be the same with the judges. They would do a glowing report of all their other judges.
Right.
Yeah.
I had a guy on at me about the fact that Willis and Fox, they've never had anything on their record to suggest that they're dishonest. Well, of course they won't, because everybody looks after each other's back.
Everybody's so busy, yeah.
Right. Wait till the truth comes out, and then we might find out exactly what's going on.
Yeah, then people start breaking.
Yeah.
And it's not always dishonesty; it's about competency. Yeah. There can be both of dishonesty and lack of competency, but in this case, competency, we've spoken in the past about the issue of the deleted voicemails, right?
Yeah.
And that famous question that Judge Willis asked Ken Kratz. Mm-hmm. His competency should have forced him to answer that question, yes or no. Is the state aware?
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
And he allowed Ken Kratz to weasel out of that. That's a matter of competency.
Yeah.
Let alone anything else.
Yeah.
So,
I mean, he wouldn't have let Dean String or Jerry Buting off that easy. He certainly wouldn't have let them off that easily. If they had just been, and deflected, Judge Willis would have he would have charged right through that and said, no, this is what I asked. Give me the answer, yes or no. He would, you know what I mean? That's what he should have done with Kratz and didn't.
It was such a powerful question, which I'm sure he didn't realize at the point he asked it, but a yes/no response was going to tell you a lot. Yes was going to tell you that, almost remarkably, that they did know who had deleted the voice messages. No was going to put him on the hook if they did and he hadn't disclosed it, right? So a yes/no response would have been an extremely powerful thing to have, and that's the very reason why Mr. Kratz, shimmy-shammied away from the actual question.
But I hold Judge Willis accountable no matter what, because he said,
right.
I'm afraid I can't see the relevance. Well, then you're the only one, dude, because guess what kind of a defense that the defense is running? It's a framing and planting defense, ding dong. Yeah. So the fact that something, is happening to Teresa's phone, her voicemails, at a critical time in this, series of events, it should matter. That you should see the relevance there. Yeah. So anyway, so
my point there would be that because, as I say, judges are voted in, they are sensitive to public opinion. And
some are, some aren't. Some are appointed, some are voted. But yeah.
Yeah, but in Manitowoc, those judges, it's such a huge case. Yeah, they are going to err on the side of what's favourable to the state. Of course they are, and because I mean we got those jury slips. What was it, 100 out of the 150 people on the jury? There was only one that thought that Steve might be innocent, and I think we can guess who that was. It was probably Rick that wasn't able to stay there for the remainder of the sort of.
Trial, right?
Deliberations.
Deliberations, yeah, that's the word I'm looking for. Yeah.
Yeah.
I think it's pretty obvious, isn't it? But 149 of them, they just think he's guilty. They haven't even heard the trial yet. They've heard enough in the media, haven't they?
Yeah, and that's I'm sure what they were basing most of their decision on was what they saw and heard in the media.
Yeah. Correct.
I mean, I wouldn't fancy being a judge in that situation where everybody thinks he's guilty, or they've been told that he's guilty. Because would Ken Kratz lie?
Yeah. Well, and would he lie? And would he lie about such really negative and very vulgar and not really very lovely imagery? That just the imagery that he evoked in that press conference is part of the problem here, because he made it so diabolically, like, just nasty and sinister and everything. I mean, of course, people just couldn't get past it. They couldn't, they fell for it. They thought, oh my God, this horrible man needs to go away. They didn't, They weren't ready to question it in the least, because they fell for all that horrible imagery, thinking, oh no, he wouldn't lie about that. But I think he would. I think Ken Kratz would lie to his mother for another, whatever drug he used to like, or whatever drugs he used to take.
As we've said on many times in the past, I mean, he totally, obliterated Stephen presumption of innocence. And as an officer of the court, he needs to uphold the principles of the court just as much as anyone else does. And one of those principles is an entitlement to the presumption of innocence. Yeah. And he just walked out there in that press conference as if that principle didn't exist.
Yeah.
To me, that's... And, it's the same thing when Tom Fallon said to, in Brendan's trial, said to the jury at the end, innocent people don't confess. Right. He knows that's not true.
Yeah.
That's a lie.
Right.
That's just a straight out lie. And he's an officer of the court. He shouldn't be allowed to do that. And if he does, the judge, if they're competent, should admonish him about such a statement, and there should be consequences.
Yeah.
These guys just live in a little world of their own, like the boys' club.
Right.
Yeah.
It's amazing how, the biggest thing for me is I can't be sure of anything with this case, because what I got from the prosecution is so ridiculous and farcical that I don't know what happened. I know that I don't see any trace of Teresa being there. I don't see any trace of anything happening there. But yet we have this whole entire story of how this bloody, gory, everything that supposedly happened there and everything. But there's not a single scintilla of evidence to prove it, except for the bones in the fire pit and the bullet in the garage. But the bullet came after Brendan's confession, after they coerced Brendan, and it's sitting on top of the concrete dust that was made when they jackhammered up the crack, and it's sitting on top of that dust, and it's shiny. Anything, I don't know if everybody knows here, but when concrete dust gets on stuff, it don't look shiny no more. It kills the shine and sheen of metal objects when it covers them. And when you look at that bullet, I mean, it has shiny surfaces on it. And like I said, is laying on top of the veins of dust. So that looks fishy. The bones look fishy because they look like they totally look like they moved. And then you add the fact that there was never a foul-smelling fire reported at Avery Salvage. You got these 2 or 3, 4 different people who report seeing a fire. But here's the thing. If you're close enough to see a fire where a human is burning in it, if you're close enough to see that fire, you're close enough to smell that fire. Nobody mentions the smell. Where do we get a report of a foul-smelling fire? We get that over on Xander Road, right next door to Mr. Paul Metz. That's where we get 4.5 miles north of Avery Salvage.
Yeah.
And kind of in the area, kind of close to the area where Teresa was reported, where her car was reported being seen, kind of close to it.
Because Jambo Creek Road, which is the road where Mr. Siebert lived, on the southeast corner of the Avery area. Mm-hmm. Jambo Creek Road runs north-south. It runs up to Highway 147 and crosses over Highway 147, and then eventually leads into Xander Road on the north side of the property. But the reason why you don't know what's happened, you said at the beginning there that you don't really know what's happened, is because no one else was investigated. That's the reason. Right. Because the only person that was so-called investigated was, in my view, the wrong person, and therefore we don't know what's happened because no one took the time or effort or the will to investigate anyone else that would add a narrative that made more sense.
Right.
That's why we don't know. And that just as a matter of competency is, again, where is anyone being called to account for the lack of investigation of anyone?
No one is.
No one.
They're just quiet as a mouse. Hopefully this will all go away, they're thinking.
Forget that it's Avery and Dassey. Call it Smith and Jones, and no one investigates other people, right?
Right.
Where is any accountability for that? None whatsoever. Mm-hmm. Not even the remotest about a bit of investigation into properly questioning the relevant, close link people who we know by history are potentially likely to be involved in these things, which without absolutely knowing they are. But there's nothing about standard detective work or investigation work that's in evidence in this case whatsoever. Mm-hmm. And not only is that wrong, but it also allows the trail on a lot of that evidence to go cold as well. So,
yeah, absolutely. Or it allows it to be destroyed or lost, or
And Tom Fassbender gets up there on the stand and says, in his way, well, we don't lock and load, right? Really? You don't lock and load? You locked immediately and you loaded immediately.
Yeah.
Where is any evidence against that? So
Scott Blodorn and Ryan Hilligas both attest the fact that they were not asked. They were never felt like they were ever asked or interrogated in any way. Well,
no one was.
Both of them had a sexual relationship with her. They both should have been people of interest. I mean,
and they both may well be totally innocent, but that doesn't in any way mitigate the importance that they be properly investigated. Right? Because even through that investigation process, it may lead to other things through them that might help get to the truth, if in fact they are not involved in any way.
Yeah.
It's just, you don't close the doors on everything.
Yeah.
You know, and we know through other cases, you know, God, there's just a litany, almost one a week comes out about people who are now being released from prison after being exonerated, you know, 20 years later, 30 years later. So
that's why I talk about
to me, there needs to be some accountability and some changes that actually make sure that the players in the game are following rules, and if they don't follow the rules, there are consequences. Those players being the judicial side of things, and the defence if they weren't behaving properly.
Right.
But that everyone needs to be accountable.
Yeah, I agree.
And
I totally agree. And certainly the prosecutors, I mean, I think for me, it's more important that the state has to adhere to the rules, because they, unlike every single defendant, have really kind of limitless pockets. They have limitless resources. They are able to put forth, you know, whatever money and resources necessary to seek a conviction. But not every defendant is in a position to really put up a very good defense, or to be able to put up a defense that matches that caliber. So, I mean, for me, it's more important that the state has to follow the rules very, very, very strictly, because they do have that advantage. Now, if it's a case where the defendant is somebody that's very rich and he's hired the dream team, as it were, you know, okay, maybe that's a little different, you know, but to my mind, it's really better to just follow the rules. It's one of the problems I have with this case, and because I'm usually a law enforcement guy, I go along with the law enforcement and the prosecution. What I hate about this is that the law is out of order, and I can see that the law is out of order. It's not, you know, that's what bothers me about it. And when the law is out of order, that's when we end up in this situation like this one, or as we've seen in other cases, where the investigation now has gotten so muddied and so contaminated that you can't really trust or make heads or tails out of most of it. It's all such a mess because it wasn't handled properly, wasn't investigated properly. Things were just ignored that shouldn't have been, and you know, on and on and on. The list just goes. So,
I've got a couple of things I wanted to point out, just as you were discussing then. Obviously, Mark, absolutely spot on. There was this what's called tunnel vision investigation.
Right.
Now
Tom Fassbender calls it a funnel. But anyway, go ahead.
The Avery Commission was set up, and one of the things they were told they were no longer to do as a result of the 85 wrongful conviction was to carry on with tunnel vision. And so, you know, I'm still going to hark back to this. You know, Dean and Jerry should have done more to have addressed this issue. You know, unless A, their hands were tied, or B, that they were quite happy to go along with, you know, the fact that, well, that they felt powerless to do anything about it, and that's the impression I get. I get the impression that they could see quite clearly what was going on, but what could they do about it? And another point, I noticed that somebody had questioned about the coroner being there. Well, of course, remember the problem with the coroner, Deborah Katich, was the fact that she went to a road traffic accident where a pedestrian had been knocked down, to find sheriff's officers in shock because they'd actually arrived at the scene and ran over the victim.
Yes.
They tried to say to her, you know, can you just make it in your report that he was already dead? And she said, well, no, if it turns out that, you know, he was still alive, and then when you ran over him, you know, that's what killed him, that's what my report's going to have to be. And of course there was a big fallout. That's why they banned her. You know, they just stopped
using her. They had a reason
you know?
to not want her around.
Yeah.
And which only goes further to prove that they're dirty. Yeah. So.
And just I haven't heard of that story.
You haven't heard of that?
Remarkable.
Oh, really?
No.
Wow.
No.
I haven't read about that story in quite a while, but yeah, that was going around the first year, I remember.
Yeah, and I mean it's a really dodgy story because it's Pete Bates himself that tells it.
Oh,
so
yeah.
so we know for sure that's genuine, because he's about the only law enforcement guy in the whole of Making a Murderer that comes across as having
As
any
honest.
any decency and common sense.
Right.
And
credibility.
And just one other thing, because I can see that you're tired, dude, and I've got to head off to work shortly. The bullet. Not only should there be concrete dust, but it's been in that garage for 4 months, all over winter. It would have rusted as well.
But it probably should have had some rust on it. Absolutely. So it's like, where did that thing come from? But yeah. Yep. So.
What time is it in Australia?
It is coming up to about 10 minutes after 5 p.m.
So around about gin o'clock.
Gin o'clock.
Gin o'clock. That's right. That's right.
Time for rummy
That's right, actually. Well, you know what they say, it's 5 o'clock somewhere in the world.
Yeah,
so.
Yes.
It's always on 5 in Margaritaville.
I've got a little thing I wanted to show you. I brought this home with me when I came home from Manitowoc. Do you remember this poster?
Yes.
Richard?
Yes.
Yep.
One of the girls in the committee made it up and was on display on the day. I brought it home with me just as a bit of good luck charm for Brendan. And I just wanted to quickly say the group, the women and all the people involved in organising the rally did an unbelievable, stellar job and did so much work and put in a lot of time and materials, their own money into doing it. It's a big job.
Right.
So
and I know Carla.
Hats off to them.
I know Carla Chase was particularly taxed because she was planning on that and also planning a graduation party for her daughter.
Yeah.
And I mean, it was a lot of stuff she was juggling, and she was being so gracious as to take Mark and I on our own little tour of the salvage yard, in addition to another later visit where we went with a bunch of other people. It was this was her taking time when she had something going on. She was certainly very busy, and she was very gracious to put time aside for us supporters and allow us to go and take a look with our own eyes and see some things, even though she was quite busy. So I gotta say, my hat's off to her for being so gracious.
The wee angel that she is.
Yeah.
And let's hope she's soon feeling better, and maybe can join us soon.
Yeah. So one thing I wanted to point out, y'all see Paul's wearing his soccer shirt there. So I just want to point out, somebody was asking me that I should show the international support. So I went ahead and hung the Australian soccer jersey on the wall, and that Mark had given me. So it'll be better when I show you when my picture's bigger, obviously, because everybody's going to be looking at this tiny little thing going, yeah, we can't see nothing. So obviously I'll do an intro for this video where they'll be able to see a little bigger. So this is the Australian soccer jersey that I put on the wall to show the symbol for the Australian support for Stephen and Brendan. I'm going to be getting something from Holland from Miss Georgina Stuhlen-Bowes. Something that's kind of iconic for Holland. Obviously, Mr. Capaldi is going to be sending me something for Scotland. So, obviously, I'm on the lookout for the next person who wants to do a call from, I don't know. I noticed a lot of people watch from Ireland. But maybe I'll have to try to seek some out. But would love to have the wall covered with all kinds of different symbols from different countries for certain. But so everybody knows what we're talking about. That's the first piece. The next piece is going to be, well, I don't know what's going to get here first. Whatever, I don't know, piece of sandpaper that Paul's going to send me, or Georgina, Miss Georgina, who you guys know I had a talk with recently from Holland. She is going to send me something to kind of represent Holland, and I'm going to have that hanging up there. And from now on, with every new, international supporter that I, talk to on my channel, I'm going to try and put something up on my wall behind me to represent the international support for Stephen and Brendan, so that it's always right behind me on the wall. So I just want to let everybody know that that's kind of what's coming, so they'll understand the things that start popping up on the wall behind me. So.
Dude, we can't see you, but we sure as hell can hear you.
Hey, Mr. Capaldi, you're leaning a little bit to the left there, so you need to center yourself a bit. There we go.
That's better.
I knew you had left leanings, but.
Oh crud!
Yes,
But
yeah.
actually,
Yeah.
I heard a little story
Dress to
which
the left.
I think our American buddy's going to relay to you that you know how you're so keen football follower, right?
Mhm.
Yeah, right.
Of all brands of football. Did you have something you wanted to mention to Mr. Capaldi there about some footballing activities?
You're so concerned about America and being world champions and various things like that, but what I noticed is that USA knocked off Scotland in rugby recently, and they were ranked number 6, I believe. You guys were number 6 in the world. You were ranked, and we knocked you off.
Yeah, that was the ladies' rugby team, dude. That wasn't the full blood.
Really?
That wasn't the
Them
full
ladies
blood
had some
rugby.
big ass thighs. Let me tell you. Yeah, bearded ladies maybe.
I'll tell you something seriously, right? See
Oh,
when America.
Did you notice the deflection?
Yeah.
He deflected straight away.
True
Right?
King Grant style.
That's right.
When the Americans start taking rugby seriously, which they do in the Sevens series, they've won. They've run tournaments in different parts of the world. You know, the American Sevens rugby team is very, very good, and it's only a matter of time before the rest of the world is better watch out, because when you get some of these bigger American dudes that you know they maybe don't get the big contracts with the NFL. They start playing rugby, doing it professionally. Then you're going to have a whole good team. You know, I mean, the moment, unfortunately, the world leaders are the All Blacks. You've heard of them.
Yeah, but what are you going to do when we are that good, and then we're actually world champions?
Yeah,
and then you're then you're gonna be lost because you can't talk crap on us anymore. We're actually world champions, and you can't dispute it.
No. You
No.
know what they're going to do? I know what he's going to do. He's going to be talking about caber tossing. You know,
Either that or
telegraph
caber
pole
tossing.
We're the best tossers in the world. I can tell you that much.
That's right, and the best haverers as well.
Eunice, what does to haver mean?
To talk a lot of nonsense.
To talk a load of shit?
Yeah.
Talk a load of crap?
Yeah, like you do
No,
constantly.
you mean not me? No, Eric Ozey, like what Eric Ozey says.
No, you.
No, not me.
My vote for
That's
the
what'll
second
happen.
one.
Yeah.
All right, guys. Well, it's been fun.
Hey, I
Talk
wanted just
about
to
Brendan,
say, I know you.
which is always good. Always wanted to bring attention to that. Sorry, go ahead.
I just wanted. I know it's late for you and in the States, and Paul, you have something you've got to do. But in all seriousness, tomorrow's is a really important day. I was trying to work out in my mind when the hour might be my time, which I think might be the early hours of Tuesday morning, that the result will be known to me.
Right.
We'll phone you. We'll wake you up.
No problem. But like from all, deep in my heart, I have, great hope and good wishes for Brendan and for all the people that will benefit from a positive outcome. Admittedly, it's only just whether they're going to hear the matter, but that's a huge step if they take it on. And
I think they should.
I'm really, really, really excited and anxious about it, but I'm feeling very confident as well.
The time is right. Juveniles of limited mental ability and stuff really need the protection. It's like I said. I mean, I don't see this as a small thing. If they open up the AEDPA and leave an opening for kids like Brendan to be able to get through it and start making these state courts take the order to give special care seriously, I think that's a huge boon, huge victory.
Absolutely.
And I hope it happens.
And I want to restore the faith in the system, and if this will be an example. Hopefully, it's not the only thing that needs fixing, but it'll be an example in time of the court reinforcing its existing law and being prescriptive about it and creating accountability downstream. I mean, that's got to be good for everyone, and we'll feel a lot better about the system if we see the highest court in the land reinforce that existing law. That will give everyone a lot of confidence.
It's the same if we start using kids to shoehorn adults into confessions.
Yep.
Yeah,
Yep.
not good.
Yep.
So,
Yeah.
so well, it's been fun, guys.
All right.
Can't wait to do it again
Well,
sometime.
Yeah.
Hopefully
Yep.
next time we'll get Carla to join in on it with us.
That would be
She
awesome.
wasn't feeling quite so well
Yeah.
today, so I let her off
Yeah.
the hook. But it's not like I let her off the
So
hook.
go practice.
She's
your
only
case
going to
of
do whatever
possible.
she wants anyway. So don't listen to me. I have no say in it. So.
Oh gosh.
No, seriously though. No, I think she wanted to join this call tonight, but she just wasn't feeling well. Hopefully, we'll get to see her next time, folks.
Oh yeah. She's a superwoman. That lady. My
Yeah.
God.
She
So,
definitely
yeah.
juggles a lot of things and does it
Yeah.
Yeah.
without dropping too many
Yeah.
balls. So,
Yeah.
alrighty, guys. We'll see you
Okay,
next time.
catch
Good
you
to speak
soon.
with you.
Yeah.
Take
Good
care.
night.
Okay, so that's the end of it. We had our little fun at the end there, So, anyways, serious matter though. We really, really do hope that the Supreme Court sees the real necessity to open up habeas relief for kids like Brendan, because there's going to be more. There's been many, and there's going to be more. You guys, I've talked to you about Devontae Sanford. I mean, such a tragic case. 8 days after his conviction, the real killer, a hitman, came forward, told the police, because he had actually killed 12 people. They had gotten Devontae Sanford for 4 of those 12 people. And when he came forward confessing to all 12 and told the police where they could find the gun that matched all the ballistics and everything, I mean, it was obvious that this hitman was the guy who had done it. The district attorney, Kim Worth, did not make it right. She basically just prosecuted the hitman for the 8 people that she hadn't, that she basically wasn't able to prosecute anybody on. She just got him for those 8 and left Devontae Sanford sitting in prison for a crime he didn't commit. He ended up being in there about 15 years. He was recently exonerated, finally. And the state of Michigan had to pay him almost $500,000. See, this is the thing. A lot of people out there think that because there's those of us out here who are watching the wrongful convictions and looking at how these things happen, and we can kind of see clear seams and clear earmarks that run through cases of wrongful convictions that kind of makes them almost kind of easy to spot. And especially when you see cases like this where the DA knew and yet didn't do the right thing because she was afraid that her conviction, percentage, win percentage might go down or something. I don't know. But all I know is a young kid lost 15 years of his life because of her pride. And what's worse is the state of Michigan has a lot of problems right now. The state of Michigan, particularly one that pops to mind, is Flint. And I mean, but the state of Michigan has many problems right now, and they didn't need to have to pay out almost $500,000. I mean, Devontae Sanford deserves it. I'm not saying he doesn't deserve it. I'm just saying if Kim Worth had done the things she was supposed to do, the state of Michigan would have had $500,000 laying around. Because I guarantee you, as she said it right, 8 days after the conviction, Devontae Sanford wouldn't have gotten almost $500,000. He might have gotten something, but nowhere near $500,000. So that's the real thing here, is we need to be paying attention to these things, because otherwise when they go on and on and on, they end up costing more, which makes the states and everybody want to dig in even more and fight them even harder. See, that's why things like what Robert Milan talk about with the conviction integrity units that he instituted in Cook County and stuff, and he helps prosecutors and DAs, basically offices all over the United States helps them set up these what are called conviction integrity units, and that's where the actual prosecutor's office is actually looking into the cases that they've prosecuted where there was maybe some sketchy things and they will periodically go back and look again and see if anything new has come about or if there's anything to suggest, and they actually try to self-correct. The thing that's good about that, listen, this is the really great thing about this, is that by doing this themselves, it removes the adversarial part of the process, because they're doing it on their own and they're not having to fight. Basically, they don't have to fight themselves. But if it was a defense attorney who was trying to help exonerate somebody, and the prosecution didn't want to let that happen, then it becomes an adversarial process. But what's cool about the conviction integrity units is that it's now at least getting some percentage of cases that are getting streamlined, basically, that are getting, fast ticketed to the finish line, essentially, when they're wrongful. When the prosecutor's office goes in and looks and sees that new evidence has surfaced or something, a new account has been collected of a witness, an eyewitness or something like that, whatever it might be that there is to now consider that wasn't there before, and then they self-correct, and like I said, saves a lot of time and money and effort in a lot of ways. In the states, the defense attorneys, the prosecutor's office itself, saves everybody a bunch of money and rights wrongs quicker. So that is what is absolutely great about conviction integrity units, and they are something for us to want to see in all of our district attorney offices all over the United States, because, like I said, at least some small percentage of cases get directed to the finish line, and and when they're wrongful, when they're really bad, and the proof is there that shows that they were incorrect, instead of having to wait 10 years to fight through the court system, the prosecutor's office can set it right relatively quick. So that's what's really cool about those. Anyways, that's about it for this video today, folks. Hope you enjoyed listening to me and Mark and Paul kind of rib each other and talk a little bit about Brendan and Stephen's cases. If you haven't already, please hit subscribe. We'll see you.